That good? Okay. All right. That was a weak. There. That got a good thing to it. Let's begin. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty and everlasting God, who has given unto us thy servants grace, by the confession of a true faith, to acknowledge the glory of the eternal Trinity, and in the power of the divine majesty to worship the unity. We beseech thee that thou wouldest keep us steadfast in this faith, and evermore defend us from all adversities, who livest and reignest one God, world without end. Amen. Thank you very much. So last week we actually finally got to the Council of Nicaea. And I know many of you probably thought, well, is the class now ending? No, because if you've ever experienced in life when you say something and you think that you say it very clearly, this might have happened with your teenager growing up. You said something, you said it very clearly, and they either didn't hear it, or heard it, ignored it, or heard it and twisted it, right? Those are kind of the three teenage options. And then what do? You look at your spouse and say, did I not say this clearly? And your spouse is like, honey, you did. I promise you said it clearly. Whatever you say, you said it clearly. And that is what happened. Nicaea, they state something, and they state something to directly counter this teaching from Arius that the Son, what was Arius' main thing? That the Son
was apart from God, or created by God.
Was a creature of God, and therefore was not fully God, right? Like, yeah, he was divine, but he wasn't divine like the Father's divine. The Father owned some things that the Son could not ever get to, which fundamentally shifts the gospel on its head from God in his fullness coming down to us, or to now creatures, whether they be angelic or even divine creatures ascending up to God. All right? It totally shifts the focus and the kind of movement of the gospel from God coming after us to save us, to us rising up. Just as Jesus is able to rise up to the Father, so can you and I, through Jesus, through the things that he offers us, or through really just following in his footsteps, we also could rise up to be with God. So the Council of Nicaea was a ecumenical, that is called the First Ecumenical Council. Ecumenical meaning all the churches are represented. It doesn't mean every single individual church is represented, but it means in general the whole Catholic, Lower C Catholic Church is represented in this council, and they condemn Arianism as a heresy. But it doesn't end there, because just as your teenager, either people don't understand what it was said, including sometimes the people that passed the council, they passed it and said, now what did we mean by that? Or people twist what they said, or people outright ignore what they said. So this week we'll look at the counter reaction to the Council of Nicaea. We mentioned last time that not soon after, even up to 2 years after the Council of Nicaea, Constantine begins to change his mind. Remember, it seems like Constantine is a heartfelt Christian. That does not mean that he is theologically astute. And so if you, at any point during this class, have felt like this is making mountains out of molehills, it is. Now, the people that knew what they were doing, who knew theology, like Alexander of Alexandria, they knew the molehill is mountain. It's everything. This small, tiny thing is the whole, all of it. It will pull all of it down in with it. But to people on the outside, it looked like, guys, this is, let's move forward here. We're really not that much in disagreement. So Constantine begins to change his mind. There were a couple bishops who were outright deposed during the Council of Nicaea. He restores them. And he restores Arius, Arius is brought out of exile. Eusebius of Nicomedia. Remember, this is the bad guy. All right, this is the guy lurking behind the scenes. There's Eusebius of Caesarea. He's like the first church historian. He's kind of a moderate guy. He's kind of caught in between both things. He gets convicted of Arianism in the council right before Nicaea, and then repents at Nicaea and gets restored. But Eusebius of Nicomedia is fully on the Arian train. Now, what's Nicomedia? Does anyone remember?
Town.
It's a town. But what particular town is special about it? At this time, it's the capital.
Yeah.
It's the capital of the Holy Roman Empire. All right, it's where Constantine has his palace. So it's a big deal. And so Eusebius, an Arian bishop, is there with Constantine in the palace, hanging out. Maybe 6 months go by, 12 months go by. Hey, remember that Arius guy? Like, you think we should?
Is this the guy that was tight with the mom?
And starts working Constantine's mom, Helena. I can't remember. I think it's Helena. Helen's from Troy. Helena is Constantine's mom. And so, you get in with the mom, and she starts chirping at her son. It's a good way to change an entire empire. So, Eusebius, he's kind of conniving, working behind the scenes. And what he sets out to do is he's going to try to take down the three most powerful Nicene bishops. And what happens in the next 25 years is a massive behind-the-scenes, and this is like Game of Thrones times 1,000, like the political maneuvering to get these Orthodox, now considered Orthodox because of Nicaea, bishops out of the way so that they can bring back Arianism. So his three main targets, Eustathius, he's the bishop of Antioch. If you remember, at the very beginning of the Council of Nicaea, Eustathius most likely was the bishop who offered a welcome to everybody. He's a big deal. He was very pro-Nicene. He gets deposed. He had the unfortunate incident of letting his mouth run a little bit farther than it should and called Constantine's mother a chambermaid, which in those times, let's just say this book I was reading said something along the lines of, judging by the hospitality standards of chambermaids in those days was quite the insult. All right, let that be what it sounds like. So he called Constantine's mother a woman of ill repute. He was deposed pretty quickly after that. Kind of ran a little bit too far. Now Marcellus of Ancyra, which is now Ankara or Ankara, Turkey, is the capital of Turkey. This will come into play a fair bit. This is Ancyra. Remember, so Nicomedia is over here. Marcellus is down here. Now he is pro-Nicene, but he is pro-Nicene, and his views will continually be the kind of the thorn in the side of the pro-Nicene bishops, because he's like your friend in college who always I didn't have a friend like this, but you can imagine a friend in college who always was trying to get in fights at the bar. Everyone's we're all just having a good time, and then you realize at some point you're the bad guy here. So his theology was basically very close to Sabellianism. And if you remember, Sabellianism is the thing that Arius was trying to fight against. Sabellianism is stressing the oneness to the distinction of the threeness. And then Arianism went too far on the other side to stress the threeness and kind of destroys the oneness. So Marcellus is very much in favor of Nicaea, countering Arius. And he's good friends with Athanasius, he's good friends with all these bishops. But the things he keeps saying, eventually the Orthodox people are going to have to deal with it, say, okay, no, not this. We're not going that far either. But he becomes a lightning rod of the Arian. It allows the Arian bishops to run a mile with what he's saying. See, we told you, they are heretical. They're the ones pushing modalism. They're pushing this heresy that we already said was a heresy, that Arius, our good friend Arius, was trying to fight, and you all, so they're able to run a mile with what Marcellus is talking about. So he eventually gets deposed, and then that leaves Athanasius, the bishop of Alexandria, who is kind of the next hero of the story. Athanasius was born probably around 296 in or around Alexandria. He was definitely educated, though he didn't seem to come from kind of a high class, but his family was wealthy enough for him to get a really good education. If you remember the Bishop Peter, who was martyred in Alexandria, most likely taught him. But Bishop Alexander, who started the whole Nicaea controversy with Arius, was his direct long-term mentor. He looked up to him and followed him. Alexander took him under his wing, basically made him his kind of scribe and assistant. And Athanasius actually, at the time of the Council of Nicaea, was a deacon, and he was actually in the room. To quote Hamilton, he was in the room where that's the last time I'll ever quote Hamilton, but he's in the room where it happened. But he was there in 318. This is earlier, before the controversy all took place. He wrote 2 books. There's some questions on the dating of that, but most people will say 318. He wrote 2 books. One is against book titles back then were awesome because they told you exactly what the book was. Against the heathens. All right, so that book was against the heathens. And then secondly, he wrote a book called On the Incarnation, which I forgot to bring my copy. It's one of the most famous works of theology that's ever been written. It forever kind of shaped the direction. And it's probably one of even before Council of Nicaea, it's one of the best encapsulations of Nicene theology. What the people in Nicaea, at Nicaea, were really advocating for. And he wrote it when he was in his early 20s.
That being the 3-in-1?
Well, just what does it mean that Christ was incarnated? And that Jesus became God, that the Son, the Word, the why. And what's cool about the incarnation is sometimes, the liturgical, like Catholic or Orthodox, they run a mile with incarnation. To sometimes the neglect of redemption. And this might sound a little heady, but everything's about the incarnation. Everything's about the incarnation. Everything's about Christ became man to redeem mankind. Therefore, creation is all redeemed. Therefore, whatever makes sense in the created world is obviously what God wants to do. And Athanasius, his point on the incarnation is really Christ became man so that he could die on the cross. Like, he's really talking about the cross and redemption and how sinners get brought before God. So for the early church, and this I think if we ever do a class on the Reformation was them trying to go back to, no, the message is about redemption. It's about sinners being brought into relationship with God through Christ crucified. So he wrote that when he was like 20. I don't know what you were doing when you were 20, but he was writing one of the most famous theology books of all time. So in 325, he travels with Alexander to Nicaea. He's in attendance during the council. And then Alexander dies in 328, and he becomes the bishop of Alexandria. And he will begin a 45-year episcopacy in which he will have to be the main person dealing with the brunt force of Arianism. Arianism under Arius was a kind of small, upstarty. It was starting to gain some traction, but they thought squashed it, and Alexander was the one who had to deal with that. It has nothing that pales in comparison to what Athanasius is going to have to face with Arianism in his episcopacy. He's going to end up being exiled 5 times. Throughout his episcopacy. Exiled, brought back. Exiled, brought back. So he's kind of the hero of our story. But he's the next guy that the Arian bishops are like, if we can get rid of Athanasius, then we're good to go. All right. So the Eusebius of Nicomedia, that's who Athanasius always knew who was behind all of the things going on. Now, again, the heretics don't come out and tell you they're the bad guys. That's like the first thing, that you learn in adult life is like, it's not black hats, white hats. It's not, old Bart, I'm the bad guy. I'm here just to be bad. No, the worst people in history and in your life are the people who convince you, I'm actually the good guy.
Well, they think they are.
They think they are. No one has ever, maybe a couple sociopaths, but the truly terrifying thing of history is most of the time, everyone thinks they're the good guys. Nazi Germany, they thought, we're the good guys. Everybody else hasn't got on board with what we're doing, but we're the good guys. And they don't often come out and use kind of out in the open tactics. They work behind the scenes. So the Eusebians begin to work behind the scenes to bring down Athanasius. They accuse him of all kinds of things during his episcopacy: immoral conduct, illegally taxing Egyptians, supporting rebels, tyrannizing dissident bishops, breaking the chalice of a rebellious priest. Now this one's funny because this one, all of them, Athanasius is continually defending. I didn't do that. On this one, he's like, maybe I did that. But he said, the guy was ordained by an Arian bishop. So, he's basically saying, one guy who's writing this said, people were shouting violence and sacrilege. You attacked and broke the chalice of a rebellious priest. And Athanasius' response was, just violence. He wasn't a priest, but we did get into it. And kind of funniest, or most funny, he got accused of murdering a bishop, keeping his severed hand for magical rites. And there's a scene in church history where Athanasius is in the courtroom defending himself against this accusation of murder. And his defense is he brings the bishop in, who's alive, and says, imagine Perry Mason, imagine Matlock. You said you killed this man, and he's right there, and he has both of his hands, and he's saying, see, I didn't do this. So that happened in church history, and very funny. So, but eventually...
So about breaking a chalice, it's a cup, right? So,
it's sacrilege. The chalice is...
I think the guy's doing church stuff, and he attacks him. It's not just breaking the chalice. It's breaking. It's like they fisticuffs, and the chalice got broken on the side. So everyone said, not only did you fight him, but this is sacrilege. And he said, no, he's not even a real priest. It's not sacrilege, but I did fight him. So Athanasius is not a meek and a mild kind of guy. All right, and which is again one of the things you find in church history is God often appoints the exact right person for the time. And they're not the person for every time. Martin Luther was not the person for all time, but he was a person for one time. God did an amazing thing through him. And then he needed other people like Philip Melanchthon to come behind him and say, okay, but let's actually make this livable. So Athanasius, eventually he is called to stand trials for charges in the Synod of Tyre. He is condemned. Again, it's kind of kangaroo court. But he takes matters into his own hands. He takes matters into his own hands. He gets accused. He stands trial in Tyre, which is down here. He gets deposed, and immediately, before they can arrest him or anything, he leaves and he travels all the way up to Constantinople, which is right outside of Nicomedia, I think, and finds Constantine on the road and surprises him and petitions directly to Constantine, which again just shows you Athanasius, he doesn't mess around. If you're gonna finally convict him on something, he's just gonna leave and go straight to Constantine and say, "This is what's happening. This is what they said." Constantine says, "Okay," and says, "No, you're back." Wave it off. But they don't stop. Eventually, they do catch Athanasius. Again, they accuse him of messing with grain shipments. Now, that's the one thing that Constantine doesn't want to mess with. He in the empire needs grain to come through Alexandria and not be messed with. And so any threat to that, Constantine's like, okay, you are banished to Trier in Germany. So again, just, I don't know, this might not be helpful, but
That's the sticks.
all the way from down here in Alexandria, he's up in Rhineland, Germany. All right. So he's all the way up there. Now, the Eusebians finally got Athanasius out of the way. And so there's massive protest in Alexandria that their bishop, who they loved, is gone. But now that he's taken out the top 3 Nicene bishops, Eusebius of Nicomedia moves to bring back and rehabilitate Arius. And so Arius, who's already been brought out of exile, now is looking to be reinstated into the church. And he's in Constantinople, and he's on his way, literally, I mean, the way the ancient historians wrote it, he is like walking to the church to get reinstated as a presbyter into the church.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's got to be...
I mean, this is 336. This is 10 years after, he's probably old.
60.
Yeah. I can't remember when he was already old at the Council of Nicaea, but maybe 70, 80, I don't know.
A spring chicken.
Not too old for a heretic, I'll tell you that. Or maybe too old for a heretic. Arius is literally on his way to the church to be formally reinstated when he needed to use the bathroom.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I'll tell you what, if you've ever seen ancient historians love something more, they loved how Arius dies. Athanasius recounts, this is a quote from Athanasius, praying about these things, the bishop withdrew, very concerned, but a wondrous and unexpected thing took place. As those with Eusebius threatened, the bishop prayed, and Arius, overconfident in those who were with Eusebius, foolishly went into the throne because of the necessity of his gut. Immediately, according to what is written, falling face first, he burst in the middle. Upon falling, he immediately expired, deprived of both communion and his life at the same time. You could just see Athanasius smiling as he writes how Arius...
That's an Elvis death.
It's very close. Socrates or Socrates, I'm not sure how you say this historian's name, but not the Greek philosopher, but a church historian. He wrote it like this. When he came near to the Forum of Constantine, in which the Porphyry column stands, a fear from a bit of conscience seized Arius, and along with the fear followed a loosening of the bowels. Asked whether there was a privy nearby, and learning there was one beyond the Forum of Constantine, he went in that direction. Then faintness took him, and his bottom fell through along with his excrement. The thing which doctors call the rectum immediately fell out through his bottom, with a lot of blood following, and the rest of his intestines flowed out together with his spleen and his liver, and he died immediately. They relish how he dies. And I'm not saying that they just relish talking about it. They painted it about it. Arius dies the death that the Nicene crowd thought he deserved to die. To them, there is no truer acknowledgement that the Lord is on their side than how Arius embarrassingly, painfully, but the degradation of it all.
He blanked himself to death.
Yes, literally, he blanked himself to death. And again, the Nicene crowd runs a mile with that. They are. I'm just going to leave this picture up a little bit longer. So Arius, and that thus endeth the heretic. But Arius lives on in the Eusebians. In 337, Constantine dies. Constantine puts aside his purple robe, clothed in a white garment, and baptized by the Eusebius of Nicomedia. So Constantine, who called the Council of Nicaea together to combat and condemn Arianism, ends up being baptized before his death by the Arian bishop. And now that Arius is dead, kind of the heir apparent of Arianism.
Well, anyway. That was the local dude anyway, right?
It was the local dude that he let stay around. But, I mean, again, Eusebius and them are going to run a mile with that.
Is the mom still alive?
I don't know. That's a good question. Probably not. All right, so politically, immediately the kingdom completely falls into chaos. 2 of his half-brothers are murdered, and 6 young princes, leaving only 2 cousins alive, Gallus and Julian. Julian will come into play in a little bit because he will end up being the emperor of Rome. But for now, his 3 sons parcel out the empire: Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans. I'm telling you, this family and their names. So they kind of divided up Europe, Asia, and then Italy, Africa is the other one. And then Constans defeats and murders his brother Constantine II. So he executes. But so he and Constantius ruled the kingdom split in half. Constans ruled the west, and Constantius the east, from about 340 on. During this time, Athanasius returns down to Alexandria from Trier. On his way down, he stops by the Bishop of Rome, who his story is, we're not going to really trace it that much, but this is about the time where the Bishop of Rome starts to try to take a lot more power and authority for himself. All right, so which will grow into
the Catholic Church,
the Pope, right?
Yeah.
This idea that the Bishop of Rome is not just one bishop, among other bishops. He's the top of the chain. That was not an ancient church. That's not how the ancient church treated. So that got developed later. So
is this where the split comes between, like,
that'll come, but the early seeds of that. Yeah, well, no, not yet. That actually comes into fruition in 1054. But this is the early seeds of it right here.
Okay.
Eusebians, Athanasius is returning to Alexandria. He's welcomed right before he's about to come back in. The Eusebians undermine him by appointing a new bishop there, who's Arian, and so and he has an army or guards with him. So Athanasius has to flee. Julian, the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, invites Athanasius to come to Rome to be with him, where he returns or kind of reunited with Marcellus. So there's some Nicene bishops gathering in Rome who are starting to talk and figure out how they're going to handle. But there's a growing split that is showing between the East and the West. The East is stressing the diversity of God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The East is leaning more and more Arian. Now, which is interesting because Nicaea was mostly Eastern bishops, and they countered Arianism, but they are nervous about Sabellianism. Always. This kind of collapsing the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit into one thing, totally. And so they're constantly stressing the plurality of God, the threeness of God. And the West is beginning to get... They weren't as good theologically early on as the East. But they're starting to get their kind of bearings a little bit, especially with Athanasius there. And they're stressing, no, it's the unity of God. And they have Marcellus who's going, it's the unity of God. And eventually they're going to have to separate from that. But you do start to see this growing divide between East and West, between what is stressed. While they're not outright...
It's the same problem. It's the exact same problem they've been dealing with the whole
right.
time.
So one of the things that begins to happen is they're all running into this thing if they don't have the right words to explain how to explain it. And so they keep talking past each other, which is Socrates, the church historian, said that this whole period is basically a battle at night. That neither side understood the other side's position. They just knew they didn't like them, and they knew they were wrong, but they didn't understand why they were wrong, how they were wrong, how to explain why they're wrong, what are they saying is right. And so they're just constantly going back and forth. So in 341, the Eusebians gather a council in Antioch in the presence of Constantius, who's the emperor of the East now, and 97 Eastern bishops. And they draw up a profession of faith. They deny following Arius. All right, so the bishops of the East, they know Arius was condemned in Nicaea. We can't keep following that. But what they're going to do is they're going to just pivot a little bit. And so they say, we deny following Arius. And the reasoning they say is, he's a presbyter. We're bishops. We don't follow him. Like he's just an elder. We're. So they basically say, we are bishops. He's just a presbyter. We don't follow. We're not Arian. But then they proceed to support basically all of Arius' views. They say the Father who is truly Father, and the Son who is truly Son, and in the Holy Spirit who is truly Holy Spirit, the names not being given without meaning or effect, but denoting accurately the peculiar subsistence, hypostasis, rank, and glory of each name, so that there are three in subsistence and in agreement one. So what they begin to posit is we got three beings who are by will deciding to be one. That's different than by nature being of the same substance. That's like three people deciding. Maybe a decent example of that might be marriage. Marriage is two people of uniting wills to say we want to be one. We want to be considered kind of one body, one legal unit, one whatever you might one church unit, a family, whatever you might say. That's different than we are one. We by nature, by our essence, we share the same essence, and so they pass this statements. But again, you'd have to know what you're looking at. I mean, like when I was just reading that, you probably thought it doesn't sound
about right.
Again, because heretics don't come out and say our goal is to destroy Christianity. Like they come out and say, no, look, we're saying this. It sounds and so it's people like Athanasius who are saying, we know exactly what they're up to. So, in eye of the future, this council begins a new development in the debate. Homoousia, which we talked last week. Ousia is the Greek word for being or substance. Homo being same. So, what was put into the creed of Nicaea was homoousia. Now, everyone was kind of uncomfortable with that word because, if you remember last week, that word was the word that was condemned when they were fighting Sabellianism. Because Sabellianism is happy with saying it's homoousia. It's all one God. There are not three persons, or like they play around with that. And so during the Council of Antioch, before the Council of Nicaea, the church actually said no homoousia. The Nicaea comes out and says same homoousia. It is homoousia. So the Arians, again, they run a mile with that. They say, we're telling you, the Nicaea, those people are the ones who twisted this. And so there's a big debate between homoousia and homoiousia. And it's all coming down to one vowel. Homoiousia means of like substance. Same substance, like substance. Same versus like. Now, there's a lot of things that you can believe with Christianity if you believe that Jesus was like God. Jesus had the same stuff, all of his stuff. It was the closest thing to God that you could possibly. It was so like him. Carbon copy of God, but not God, right? And so this whole debate begins to frame the whole thing. Homoousia, homoiousia. Athanasius, for instance, he was ambivalent about homoousia, and then all of a sudden when he sees the Arians attacking it, he loves homoousia. He's all about homoousia. He's like, this is the thing. We can't get rid of this. So the question of this practically comes down to, does Jesus reveal to us the Father's heart, or does he reveal parts of him? This really comes into, does Jesus know the Father? So when he says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Or is there something about the Father that is held back from Jesus, to which Jesus would say, I know most of the Father, or I'm like the Father. I'm close to the Father, but I'm not with the Father. I'm not of the same substance of the Father. And therefore, then the question for you and I becomes, well, what about the Father's missing? And is that thing against me? That means it has nothing that can be offered to us. Instead, Orthodox Christianity is Christ offering all of God to us. His life, his essence, his being to us, given to us. We are not given copies of God. There's also not a God. Now, God is incomprehensible. You and I cannot totally comprehend him, but that does not mean that he is hidden and unknown. Those are two different things. The incomprehensibility of God means he is so big that you and I cannot. He's infinitely big. But that isn't the same as saying he's unknown. That what we know in Christ is he has revealed himself fully in the Son. And so if the Son is merciful, God is merciful. If the Son is gracious and loves sinners and brings sinners to himself, so does the Father love sinners and bring sinners to himself. There's not a God lurking behind that, ready to bring down the hammer. There's not a bait and switch. Oh, come in with grace, and then, it's all law, right? So these have practical effects, and it is coming down to a big deal. One last attempt at reconciling in 343, the Western bishops call a council to try to settle the matter. The Emperor Constans in Sardicia. Emperor Constans is the Western emperor. This is basically the farthest east city in the Western Empire. So he calls a council here so that the Eastern bishops can come. And there's actually a pretty good turnout. There's about 90 Ascendant of Cordoba, who was the president of the Council of Nicaea. He's still kicking. He's like in his 90s, or maybe even, I think he's 100. He'll be 100 in a little bit. But he's there. He heads the meeting again, maybe as a callback to Nicaea. Like, remember, they're trying to this is our next ecumenical council to try to solve this thing. So he heads it up. They have 90 Western bishops. They have 80 Eastern bishops. The Easterners are not there to actually accomplish anything. The Easterners promptly, as soon as the meeting starts, they challenge the right of Athanasius and Marcellus to be there since they have been deposed. That challenge gets rejected. The Easterners leave that night because what they say is, again, they don't come out and say, they say, well, you have to go. Constantinius II just had a major victory over Persia. We need to go back and celebrate. That's what they say. And they don't go far. They go all the way to... what if that just stayed up? I mean, imagine that. This town. Philippolis. All right, so they're like, we have to go back east and be with the emperor. And they go like 30 miles. If that. And from there, they draft a letter. They write a statement. They condemn Marcellus, Athanasius, Ausius, and Julius of Rome, the Bishop of Rome, and they affix to the letter the Arian creed that we had just read to it. Meanwhile, in the council that's still happening, because they all leave and they're like, well, we're going to keep meeting. Now the votes are decidedly in the West favor. They reinstate Athanasius and another bishop who had been deposed. They aren't sure about Marcellus, because now some of his teachings, they're starting to go like, this guy is not helping us. And so they're a little unsure about Marcellus. Ausius recommended, let's get a new creed. And Athanasius said, no, we have to stick with Nicaea. That was the creed. That's the whole church, the whole church agreed on that creed. That's a lot of rhymes.
Is that the creed that we read at church?
Well, it's the early start of it. We read it last week. It's missing some things, but it's the beginning of it. All right, so maybe it's finally over. In 344, Emperor Constantius begins to depose and exile bishops loyal to Nicaea. In 345, so that's the Eastern bishop starts to clear house in the East, getting out the Nicene bishops. So the East is moving more Arian. Yeah, 5 minutes. Thank you. In 345, Constantius invites Athanasius back to be Bishop of Alexandria. So now in 345, you start to see this, like, I think Constantius probably knows he cannot have a war with his brother in the West. And so they start to play nice. And he starts to say, oh, you know what, Athanasius, come back, be bishop in Alexandria. Athanasius takes his time. He moves down from Rome. He stops and he talks to the bishop in Rome for a while. He goes and meets with a bunch of people. He ends up in 346, finally returning to Alexandria. He's welcomed 100 miles out with people lining the streets to welcome their beloved bishop back home. And then all these Arian bishops, they actually declare themselves. The ones who had left the council saying, we're out, because Athanasius is here and he's been deposed. Now they're all playing nice, which is interesting. Why are they all playing nice at the same time? And it's probably some backroom meeting and say, let's play this nicer. So they all declare themselves, we're in communion with the Bishop of Alexandria, Athanasius. And in 350, and here's the kicker, in 350, Constans the Western bishop, who was friendly towards Nicaea, he dies, leaving Constantius, the Eastern bishop, the sole emperor of the whole empire. And then all of a sudden, it's like Michael Corleone at the end of Godfather, when he's playing nice with everybody. Remember Vito? I'm not going to seek vengeance for my son's death. Son. And then right when he gets the chance, everything's nice. Oh no, we're all friends again. He starts taking everybody out. One by one, major Nicene bishops are taken out. And this culminates in February 8th in 356. Imperial troops break into the church of Theonis, where Athanasius is leading a service, surrounded by clergy and his consecrated virgins, and people start dying. They just start attacking people. The troops break down the door. They demand to take Athanasius. His clergy rush him out, and he escapes in the midst of the chaos. And he wanders into the desert, where he'll be for the next, while, maybe 10 or 20 years. In the desert, moving from one hiding place to another, welcomed by the monks, never once betrayed by his people. This is known as Athanasius contra mundum, Athanasius against the world. So there's a legend, I don't know if it's true or not, but somebody at one point said, Bishop Athanasius, the entire world is against you. And his response was, then I am against the world. So it comes down to one man saying, I'm not giving in. I don't care what happens. The Nicene legacy really lives on in the desert with Athanasius, simply refusing to give in just because it cost him or just because of the power play, but confessing truth, that he believes this is what's true, this is what the gospel is. I will not give in. In the meantime, while he is in exile, in 359, Emperor Constantius requested a council to unite the church. Over 150 Eastern bishops gathered. Because of all the controversy around homoousia, homoiousia, they decide, and this is Constantius' idea, just get rid of the word altogether. And they end up something even worse, where they just say, instead of the Son is of like substance to the Father, that was homoiousia. Same substance, like substance. They say, leave out substance. The Son is like the Father, which is 10 times worse than all of it. And so they end up saying, you know what, we're just going to go with the Son is like the Father, which means it's basically Arianism. Right back to the Son is completely a creature. It has no bearing to the nature and the essence of the Father. The Son is like the Father. They literally force, at some point by torture, Western bishops to sign the creed. Osseous himself is at 100 years old at this point, and he gets confused, and they force him to sign it. This guy lived through the Diocletian persecution. And earlier when the Arian bishops are fighting him, he's like, I've lived through persecution before. You can persecute me all day long. I'm not giving in to this. But then they get him when he's 100. He's old, he's frail, he's confused. And he signs it. Every single, basically, at the end of 359 or 360, every major see in the empire is run by an Arian bishop. Athanasius encourages bishops not to sign it. The bishops who don't sign it are replaced with Arian bishops. And St. Jerome, writing later, he says, down with the faith of Nicaea was the cry. The whole world groaned and was astonished to find itself Arian. By 360, every major see in the Holy Roman Empire was Arian. Nicaea had been defeated. That was going to be a longer sentence. It was 2 a.m. when I was finishing this. This is the darkest moment in this whole thing. And it really comes down to one man, Athanasius, not giving in. And then what's going to happen, what we're going to see next week, is Athanasius, through his work, he's not the ultimate one that pushes it over the finish line. There's going to be 3 pastors from Cappadocia, which is in Turkey, who rise up under Athanasius, trained by Athanasius, reading Athanasius, and they're the ones to actually turn the tide that we'll look at next week. They're called the Cappadocian Fathers. Basil, Gregory of Nazianzus, and Gregory the Great, I think it's always confusing because there's 35 Gregories, and some of them are evil. But the Cappadocian Fathers are going to be the ones who kind of bring back Nicaea. But it is a reminder that just because every time in this world when we think that we've achieved something, it very rarely lasts. But in the midst of it, God is still working to preserve his truth and his gospel. Even if it comes down to one person holding on to the truth. Even in the midst of exile and all that was going on, that's how God does things. And even when everything looks dark, and we could be in churches today that things look dark, and yet we hold on to the truth and the gospel, despite what might be going on around us. So, all right, let's go and worship this great God.